I want to welcome you all. I am so thrilled you're here. And those who have never been here, I hope you'll come back again. On your table is a list of the programs we're doing this year. And you hear this every time I talk. The purpose of this institute was bringing people together, from people you've never known before. And you may find out you have brand new friends that may think differently, but that you can talk to each other. So that's what the purpose of this institute is. Today we have Alan Patricof, who wrote the book, No Red Lights, and what it really means. He's still going. And he is a venture capitalist, and he now has another fund, and he ran the marathon at 88. I'm not supposed to tell everybody the age, huh? Okay. And then we have Bernard Schwartz, who tells you about luck and opportunities. And the thing I can say about my life is that I probably wouldn't have the life that I've had if I didn't walk through doors that I never knew were there. And I tell you, that's the idea of having a life. And now we have a moderator. And this is who I'm thrilled she's a woman, because usually you see all the men in this economic world, and she's made a big success of herself. Susan Waterfall. She started out as a psychologist, right? A psychologist, and she met a man named Ned Morgans, and he founded a hedge fund, and she worked for him, and now they're partners. And I tell you, I was talking to her about it. It's a growth fund, and it specializes in technology and healthcare, and they have one hell of a record. So if you're interested, talk to her. So I'm going to let you take it over, and this is being moderated, and I can't do this. Okay. Thank you.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, we're incredibly lucky to have two very successful men that we can maybe learn something from. As Dale said, Alan Patricof has been one of the major people in the venture capital business. I've read both their books. They're really amazing. They're great vignettes in these books besides their business career. And his is No Red Lights, which he's going to tell us about. And Bernard is also an amazing person. He was CEO of L'Oreal Corporation. Of L'Oreal Corporation, which was a manufacturer of electronic weapons detection systems. And he sold his company to Lockheed, which was fantastic. And a very, very interesting story that Bernard tells. I want you first, at some point, to tell us about your brother Harold, who was a POW in World War II. Mm-hmm. Anyway, these are the two gentlemen that we're lucky enough to have today. So what I'd like to start out with, for both of you, how did you come up with this title, and why did you write a book at this point in your life? You want to start, Alan?
Sure. Thanks. Thank you, Dale, for inviting me. Actually, this is the second time I've been here. I was here a couple of years ago with the ex-president of Apple. I think we sat over there. Now they've changed the location. I wrote the book No Red Lights because that's the way I live my life. And I was sitting around 3 years ago, and I had this, it was before COVID, but I was obsessed with two things. One was I saw a lot of young people who I've mentored over the years, and there are tens, if not hundreds of them, if you've been in business as long as I have, and Bernard. And I was very concerned that they were living very myopic, narrow lives. They were in their 20s or 30s, and all they did, if they were bankers, they did spreadsheets on the weekends. If they were lawyers, they did briefs all weekend. And they didn't smell the flowers. They didn't taste the opportunities that come in front of all of us. And I had lived a life, I have lived a life, and I still live it, where if I see an opportunity, I just go for it. And if you read my book, which I hope you'll do, you'll see that I've done everything from classic car collecting to art collecting to working for the government in international affairs to running 3 different venture firms. And I really believe that I have done a lot of things that, because either they came in front of me and I took the opportunity, because I agree with Bernard's title. He says, just say yes. I say, never say no. If you have a positive attitude and you only know the word yes, it changes your psyche. And so I was very concerned about what I saw in younger people, and even more importantly, what I really was concerned. I had a particular friend of mine who at 60 was put into forced retirement at a law firm, and I thought it was insane to be 60 years old. You have the best Rolodex, the best experience, the best contacts of the whole world, and I found out that a lot of people, and in fact, my ex-firm, Apex, that I had started in 1969, now has a rule that at 60 you have to retire. And I said, this is crazy. People at the peak of their life. And so if you believe like I do, and I get in my book, I'm going to live to 114. If you don't believe me, come to my funeral if you're still alive. But if you have that kind of mental attitude, saying yes, taking advantage of opportunities, living, you got to get your mind that way. I'm going to live that long. At 60, you're just a little over half your life. So my thesis was, I want to inspire people to do interesting things with the second half of their life, whether it's writing poetry or whether it's going back into the same business. I mean, Bernard would have been great to go back and start a third. He started another one, by the way, besides L'Oreal. But he'd go back for a third one. I'm in my 3rd firm. I started 2 years ago, a new venture firm. I had done 2 before with a 48-year-old partner, a woman partner. And we're off to the races in building up a whole new set of investments and new clients, et cetera. And so the reason I wrote the book was a bifurcated reason: to inspire young people and to inspire my older friends or ones who weren't my friends. And I just want to finish this part of it by saying, the other day I was walking into the lobby of my building, and I've lived in my building for almost 40, 50 years. And another person who lived there not quite as long walked in as a member of the New York Stock Exchange. I'm sure a lot of you would know him. And he said, Alan, I didn't even know this. I bought your book. I loved it. I gave it to all my kids. I gave it to my friends. He said, the only complaint I have is he's 80. I wish I had read it 20 years ago. And to me, that's the best review I've gotten of any review, because he got the message and that it was for this audience. Anyhow, that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I called it No Red Lights.
Bernard?
I wrote the book because I was chairman of a company called L'Oreal, and we had done extraordinarily successfully. I had an experience of 25 years of successive quarters in our company, in which we increased our income from the year before, and we became a Fortune 200 company. It was just not me. We had special morale. We had kept our people. I looked internally when I wanted to elevate people. I didn't go out and hire people. They knew they were part of the firm. I was a tough boss, but I think I was a fair boss. And we did extremely well. And my 2 children were after me to write a book about L'Oreal. And I decided finally I would do that, because we had a special moral. And that was, at a negotiating table, there doesn't have to be one loser and one winner. You can have 2 winners. And that's the way we conducted our business. And so I decided to write this book. I wish I had kept a diary. I urge you all to keep a diary. It'll be the most valuable thing you've done in your life. But I didn't have it, but I took my business calendars and I went through page by page. And whenever I saw something interesting, I would dictate it to a stenographer who came in twice a week and spent a couple hours with me. And I accumulated these things, went to Simon & Schuster, asked if they would make a book, because I am not a book writer generally. I had a lot of fun writing this book. It turned out good. I hope you all read it. And I decided to write a book, and Simon & Schuster was interested, but they said, don't write it about Loral, because if you write it about Loral, it'll be in the business section of the bookstore. If you write it about Bernard Schwartz, it'll be up front, and people will come in and buy it. So I started it again and wrote about my life. And I found more out by searching out things about my life. I learned more about myself than I knew before. Not everything I liked, but it's Just Say Yes comes from the idea that I really think positively about the world. I think even now when I speak to my friends and see people and talk to people, there is such negativism that I hear on a continuous basis. I don't see that. I see positive things. We've come through a pandemic that has been very difficult.
This is why Bernard and I are good friends.
Yes, yes. We're also good friends for something else. I mean, to tell you, very early in my business career, I met Alan Patricof. He became interested in my company, and he helped me in, I was making acquisition, and he was useful, helpful in making that happen. But in the way he interfaced with people, the way he really drew them out was exceptional. It was an art form. So we've been friends for a very long time, and good friends. I don't run the pen. I don't run in Central Park, but he does.
Well, there was two things I found fascinating in your book. One was when you decided to become CEO of Loral, you really didn't have very much experience in that area, in the defense area. I'd love you to tell people how you educated yourself. And the other thing that was a great story in there, Loral, and I'm going to read this, developed the ALR-56, a radar warning system for the Air Force F-15s. And when you went to talk to them, you knew it was going to be a losing proposition. So you decided that you would get around that in some way and work out a contract so everybody was a winner.
Well, it was not quite as brilliant as that. I was president of a company called Reliance Corporation. I don't know if many people know about that.
Saul Steinberg.
Saul Steinberg. And I was president of the company and doing extremely well, feeling very happy, had a home in Great Neck, New York. Kids went to school. Everything was good. And a friend of mine, Bob Ho, was my best friend, who was head of Wookie 4 in New York, called me one day and said, would you like to have lunch with me and a couple of people on the board of Loral Corporation? So I said, what's Loral? So he told me that he was on the board and they would just like to sit down and talk to me. So I got a standard poor sheet, read up about Loral, became an expert in an hour and a half, sat down for lunch. And what had happened during those days, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into here, but in those days, diversification was the style on Wall Street. You had a good company, successful company. They were urged to go out and buy other companies to get diversification, which is maybe a very smart thing to do from an investment point of view, not so for a business point of view, from my point of view. Loral was a company that had done well in the defense field, but it had diversified into 4 other companies, all of whom were losing money. So I sat down at lunch and I said, look, you guys know about the defense business. That's where you should be. Stick to your knitting. Get rid of those other companies, you'll do well. So the next day, Bob Hood called me and said, would you like to do that? I said, do what? He said, what you described. I said, well, when you go work for a guy by the name of Leon Alpert. I said, I know Leon Alpert. I wouldn't work for him in a million years. He said, well, maybe you don't have to work for him. Maybe you could take over. So what I did then was do due diligence on the defense business. And I found out that it was a very good business. That if you got a contract with the U.S. government, you had it for 20 years. And so I ended up in negotiation, bought the company from Leon Albert, his interest, and became chairman, and put my own board in. And I didn't know anything about the defense business, but I knew a lot about business. And I ran it like a businessman. And but you know, I would at our board meetings and our management meetings, they would be talking about things I couldn't even understand. So I hired a young man who was not a student but a teacher of electronics at Columbia, and he would come in the morning on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8:30. And between 8:30 and 11:30, I locked the door, and he and I would listen to him, and he would teach me something about electronics. So after several months, I began to get the terminology, at least, of what electronics was all about.
Yeah.
And when at a meeting, my people were talking about something, I would ask a question. And I could see them hesitate and say, you know, this bastard knows something about electronics I don't know. I learned the hard way.
Yeah, well, you did a great job.
I learned
sure.
it.
It's
You
funny.
want to go ahead.
I would say it's funny about asking questions. About 5, 6, or maybe 6, 7 years ago, I was at a lunch like this or a dinner, and I sat next to someone. It was David Stern, who was the commissioner of the NBA, who was just retiring, and he and I got to talking, and he was telling me he didn't know what he was going to do next. So I said, "Come on around to the office." At that time, I was running my second firm, Graycroft, and he would come in. David, if any of you don't know, he was an incredible businessman. He was, I think, also a lawyer or an accountant, and he came into the NBA and built the NBA to this gigantic colossus. It was nothing when he got in there. And so I said, if you have nothing to do, why don't you come into our office on Mondays and listen to presentations of young entrepreneurial companies? So he would come in, and he would ask the dumbest questions because he didn't understand the jargon or anything else. And he asked the questions that a lot of people wanted to ask were too embarrassed to ask. It's exactly the story in the way Bernard's saying. And gradually, everybody wanted to hear what David had to say and his opinion. He became a very good, very close friend of mine, and became a very important part of our friend. But it was all because he wanted to know more about every company that walked in and learn about these businesses. And David, when he retired, I guess was in his 70s. So he never stopped learning.
So one of the other things that Alan did, he started really in the venture capital business in 1970, and then took a hiatus, I think, in 2001, and decided to come back. And now he's doing something that's very interesting called Primetime Partners, which might be worthwhile talking about.
Sure, there are several investors here. I will not identify them in the room who were nice enough or supportive enough to join me in this endeavor.
I was one of them.
Larry Leeds raised his hand. Larry Leeds and Ellen Stern, right? Where are you? Right? Is she here? Yeah. Her husband, family, were in my first fund in 1970,
Wow.
which is amazing. I have a lot of investors who have been with me through every, and you know, you don't just raise one fund, you raise fund 2, fund 3. I think I had, the first fund is now called Apex. I started with $2.5 million. I'm not involved, but it manages $75 billion today. And the second firm, Graycroft, started with $75 million and now runs $3 billion. But every one of these firms, I started with a woman. And what Susan's been asking is my first part, it was a woman, and I'm going to repeat what she said to me outside, which is in the book, is when we would go to meetings in those days, in the 1970s, I actually had a specific situation where a guy who was pitching his company, and Pat Glory, her name was going to be running the show in this. He said, "I won't deal with a woman." And I said to him, "If you won't deal with a woman, then we're not going to give you any money, even consider the investment." And I have been a major supporter of women in my field forever. My second firm I started with a woman, and my third firm I've just started with a woman. And I think women are playing an increasing role in the whole entrepreneurial world, and in the venture world, in the financial world. You read a lot about women being discriminated. I do not believe, I mean, certainly from my standpoint, I haven't, because I've had lots of women partners, but I think it just needs a lot of time for women. Right now, more than 50% of the people graduating from business school are women. So they're getting out there, and you're going to see more and more companies started by women. And
So
more.
I'm going to jump in there for
She
myself.
was a big success early.
Okay, so I always thought being a woman, the glass half full person. I'm always say yes. So for me, when I started out as a young woman, I thought it was a huge advantage to be a woman. As an analyst, I'd call somebody up, they would always see me, and I played the trump card. So, I mean, in the sense that I got in to get the meeting, okay, and that's really what you wanted to do. And I think it's a huge advantage to be a woman.
Sure.
Don't look in the other direction, and don't take it as a negative. I mean, I was the only woman at Forsman Leff, and Tony Forsman and Joel Leff were about as tough as they come.
But Susan, I'm totally in your side. But there's enough in the press to know,
I know
that everyone is complaining that there aren't enough women entrepreneurs, and aren't enough women in the making the investments. I just think it's happening, and it's going to happen even stronger. And you absolutely right. If you were unique, it always works.
Right. Anyway, so there were some other sort of fun vignettes in these books, and one of the ones I love in Alan's book, he always, when he'd go into a meeting, he would tell them how cost-conscious he was, and then all of a sudden, I guess he couldn't get any other kind of car, he drives off in this white limo. And that reminded me of the time when Tony Forsman and I were trying to get an account, and Tony loved these stretch limos. We arrived at this meeting, this big long stretch limo. It was a religious institution. We never got it, but you told me you got the meeting, one way or the other. The other thing that Alan talked about, which might be great advice for people, is I loved your vignette about how you decide whether a meeting went well or not by what people say at the elevator. So give us a little insight. People will learn how to interpret this.
I don't know how many of you still have meetings, but I was taught actually by the Japanese that always remember the last thing that's said at the elevator door. Right. Because that's the best. People, unfortunately, leave a lot of meetings or a lot of, and don't come to the what's next. And so I learned very early on that when you're standing at the elevator, say, well, shall we get together next week, or to find out something that got some closure to the meeting.
And then I have one last question. So from an international perspective, the world has changed. China is now in the picture. We have that balloon up there now. We no longer seem to have a bipolar situation with just Russia. So how do you think this change is going to affect the business environment going forward? Do you have any
Bernard is the expert on that.
Thoughts on that? You did a lot with, Saudi Arabia, all kinds of people.
Well, yeah, we were an international company dealing with all countries in the world, not Russia, but others. Oh, not Russia. I look upon America's opportunities today to be greater than they ever have been before. The fact that Russia is going to be, we represent 26% of the world trade. There's no question about the fact that China is a big country. It will be a very big competitor, the leading competitor to the United States. And so what? And, maybe they'll have 15, 16% of the world trade. So what? We're still the country in the world that is leading technology company. We're the leading company in so many issues, so many ways, manufacturing, design. We lead the world in almost every occupation, not every, but almost every. Competition should not hurt us. It'll only make us better. And China is will be a big economic competitor. The fact that they're also a military competitor is another issue. And we're hopeful that they learn something from what's happening in the Ukraine today, because the rest of the world has combined against the aggressor, and that's what's causing them the problem. And that's a lesson for China. But China has enormous problems of its own. And for them to solve all their problems and still be a leading competitor and still be a military force is a challenge that I don't think they're going to do as well as we have. We in this country have for several hundred years demonstrated that we have an extraordinary combination of talent, an extraordinary combination of get up and get 'em, of just saying yes. And that is a characteristic of who we are. We should not underestimate ourselves. And I have to tell you that the people I speak to, many in this room, do not understand that. Do not understand how great this country is, how important it is for the future, how important it has been for the past. Let's keep it up.
So before we open it up to questions, do either of you have any words of wisdom, any secrets about your success you can add? Alan, running marathons, is that what did it?
Everyone asked me, why did I do this? Why did I run the marathon? I trained for it for about 6 months, and I walked and jogged it. I did not run it. It would be physically impossible at 88 to run the marathon, I don't think. I ended up, by the way, the oldest person that finished the marathon this year, which was but I decided, I really goes back to what I was saying about the book and what my sake is. I really wanted to be, maybe it's pretentious. I really want to be a role model. I really want to inspire older people. So I decided last year, I went to something that some of you may know. I went to something called Burning Man. How many people know what Burning Man is? Yeah, it's about as extreme a thing you could do in the middle of the desert with myself on my bicycle in the sand. And I also had watched the marathon the year before. I had run the marathon 5 or 6 times 40 years ago. But I decided, I was watching it the year before, and I said, God, I really would love to try it. So I hired a trainer, and I went out 4 days a week in the dark in the beginning and trained for it. And I'm going to tell you a very funny story about the marathon that is not in the book, because it obviously I hadn't done the marathon when I wrote the book. My son came from California. He's 48, and he came. So in case I couldn't make it or I had a problem and moral support, he was going to go with me. So we're going along. And it's 26 miles, 26.2. That last 2 can kill you itself. You have to start over the Verrazano Bridge, which is uphill. That's the hardest part of the whole damn race, is the beginning. And then you go on 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. And we're in 4th Avenue in Brooklyn. We're on the left side of this big street, wide street, and there are thousands of people out cheering. And we're going along at our pace, which was a 17-minute mile, which is pretty damn good. And on the other side of the street was this elderly woman who was really shuffling along. And she had across her chest written, Eva. And as we're going along, the crowds are screaming, go Eva, go Eva, you can do it, Eva, you're terrific. And I'm turning to my son, and I said, what are they ignoring us? I'm 88 years old. Why don't they say, go Alan, go Alan? Nobody said, no, not a word. So I said, I can't take this. I called my son's sister-in-law, who was meeting us at mile 5. I said, Christina, come out with a Sharpie to the race. And she came with a Sharpie, and I wrote across my shirt, I am 88. And from that minute, no one ever even saw Eva again. And I had cheering the whole way for the next 20 miles. But, it fits in there. And I have to tell you, there's an extra thing, 2 extra things that are not in the book. I also did paragliding across a bay in Zihuatanejo, Mexico at Christmas, which is about 300 feet off the air. I sent the picture to I have the video if you want proof. I sent it to my son, and he said to me, I did it December 30th. He said, you have 36 hours left to kill yourself. And I just went skiing last week in Big Sky, Montana.
Good for you.
But
Right.
my point is, think that way. Never
Right.
say no.
Right.
Think positively. My new business, which you asked me and I didn't say, is called Primetime Partners, because we're all in our prime time. I think this audience is pretty much all in its prime, and you got to think that way. So I started a fund for investing in any products, services, experiences, technologies that serve what I call the ageless generation, and that's over 50, whatever you want. And there are so many things that people need as they're getting older, and frankly, it's the fastest growing part of the population, and no one's paying attention. No, the investors are not really. They really would rather go and invest in dog walking or fast delivery for millennials. So the reason I'm hogging up the mic is that, if you leave here today, Bernard, you heard a very cogent response a minute ago, and Bernard is too modest to tell you he runs I don't know if you call it a lecture. He runs a roundtable, a political roundtable, virtually every month. He writes op-eds on this subject, so he knows more about foreign affairs than I certainly know. And he's living like I say. He's living like he's going to live to 100. And by the way, the oldest person alive today is 120. Any children that are born today, 50% of them will live to 100. 50%. And there was an article from Harvard I saw last week, and I'll give you the citation if you want it. That I don't say I believe it. This is a professor, doctor. There is someone alive today who will live to 150.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. But we're all for that.
That's not me.
Anyway, should we open it? Do you have anything, Bernard, you want to add at this point?
Yes, just one other item. A subtitle to my book is a word called luck.
What?
Luck.
Luck.
Don't underestimate what luck means in your life, and make the use of it. Make it happen for you. I have been a lucky person my whole life, and I have experienced a very good life. I've had good wives, good children, good friends, good people who are not friends, who I've learned from. But opportunity is around us all the time. That's what Alan is saying. It's there, and you have to grab it. You have to make it happen for you. You have to use it for yourself. And when you use it for yourself, you use it for other people as well. Everybody benefits. So don't underestimate. I'll tell you one story. You asked me to tell the story about my brother.
I love this story, yes.
People talk to me about luck, and they say, oh, luck is what you make of it. I said, oh, yeah, let me tell you a story. In the Second World War, my brother was flying B-24s, in B-24s, from England, bombing Germany. And on their last mission, the plane was shot down, and everybody in the plane was killed, except my brother. Now, that's luck. That's not because he was smart and knew where to stand. He was injured. He landed in Belgium when it was still occupied by Germany. Germany didn't have any hospitals, so they sent him to a German hospital close by. He and another American were the only non-Germans in the hospital. and they took special care of him. They healed his wounds. He got out of the army 6 months later. He was prisoner of war, liberated by Patton, came to the United States, went to hospital here. He started a company with a friend of his. The friend and he both had $1,800 each, most of which came from the U.S. Army when they were discharged. They put the $3,600 together and they built a Fortune 500 company. Now, a lot of that was smart. He was a smart guy, but a lot of it was luck. Don't underestimate it. Use it. It's a quality. It belongs to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. Really inspiring. Does anybody have?
We should leave now, Alan.
Right. Any questions? Here, do you want to-
We should take some questions.
I think both of you are remarkable in what you're giving us an inspiration. But one of the biggest problems we have is intergenerational communication. And so I wanted you to talk about that more. I also want to give you a motto from Winston Churchill that you could use, which is never, never, never give up.
I'll give my opinion. Intergenerational, I guess I only talk in terms of, I've talked to you about all my mentees, but in terms of my family, and Bernard could perhaps speak on exactly the same, I believe in working very, very hard at family relationships. My observation is it doesn't come naturally for most people. You have to make it happen, and it takes constant work, and I have translated that into my grandchildren. I think my grandchildren, I know they go around telling everybody, and all their friends think they have the best grandfather in New York, because I am very involved with all of my grandchildren. It doesn't happen by accident if you see them once a month or every, I speak to I have 7 grandchildren. I speak to all of them more than once a week. I probably speak to some of them once a day, some of them 2 or 3 times a week. But you have to really, I'm taking 4 granddaughters to Paris in March.
I'd like to be your granddaughter.
Yeah, but I mean together. But my message for intergenerational, it's hard work. I think it's worth the effort, but you can't take it casually.
You can't take it gradually. You have to take it. You have to take it seriously. My father, my grandfather, came over from Germany and married a young woman who was born in Memphis, Tennessee. And she was born in around 1965 or thereabouts. 1865. Okay. But he lived in New York, so they lived in New York, and he was a member of Tammany Hall. Now, if many of you don't know that, Tammany Hall was a Democratic political party that ran New York City. Every element of it, they controlled it. And he was an intermediary in that company, that organization, out on the street, electioneering for a candidate during election time. In those days, it was very cold, and they didn't have radio. You stood on a corner. He got pneumonia, and he died, leaving 3 daughters, a wife, and 1 son, and that was my father. My father went out to work, had to keep the family intact, left school, and my grandmother lived a very long time after she became a widow. And every Thanksgiving, on Christmas time, Tammany Hall sent her a turkey. And every Christmas sent her a bag of coal. Now that doesn't pay the rent a lot, but it made 4 generations of Democrats. And the family has stayed very close. I have two brothers. After we were separated before because of age, but after the war, we became very, very close, bonded. Our children became bonded. Their children are bonding now. Now, I don't know what does it, but something my father have done to make that spirit that you talked about, important, the family, the family, the family. And it worked.
Anyone else?
Can I just add one more thing about the intergenerational? One of the things that I've found that really has made a difference is being up on technology. All these kids are really, really good. And if you can really stay abreast of what's going on, I think it really makes a huge difference. I just hired a 23-year-old as my assistant. And the reason I adore her is she is so technologically skillful, and I can at least communicate with her. And even the guy that manages the money, he's like 52, but we really communicate because I have prided myself on really being technologically proficient. So that would be my one word of advice.
Without qualification, yes. But let me just say one thing. The old values are important too. Loyalty, hard work, being fair. Those are elements, human elements. It doesn't come from technology. It doesn't come from anything that's strange that's being learned in schools today. It's generationally brought down. Teach your children and your grandchildren how to treat other people well. They'll treat you well.
I want to throw something in. I want you all to read my book. I want you all to send my book and Bernard's book, read Bernard's book, and send to your children, because I think they will find it equally interesting in terms of their lives.
This is not a question. This is a statement. You two guys are great. You really are. You've been friends of mine over 100 years between the two of you. And I am so proud to be both your friends. I'm an admirer, a fan, and I thought you guys were great.
You're not so bad, Larry.
Thanks.
I have a question for each of you, and that's about your spirit, your presence of gratitude and hopefulness. Was that something you believe that you were born with, or was there a period in your life that you had to make a choice to be that way?
I get asked that honestly a lot. I do a lot of these fireside chats, so I know what questions they always want to know why you picked the title, why'd you write the book, and well, of course they usually want to ask me about Apple Computer, but you haven't. You can ask me that privately. But my parents were not terrific. Everyone likes to tell a story. They got inspired. Bernard had a better experience. I did not. I can't say that my father or mother taught me something or did it. So I think you just have to have it in you. I'm not saying I was a self-made man. That's not the point. But I think my parents weren't great parents. They weren't great grandparents. It's just the way I am. And I don't know about Bernard.
I'm like he is.
What?
I'm like you are. No, listen. The human part of relationships have always been very important to me. I don't know where I get it from. But the family, relationships. I grew up in New York City. I lived there all my life. I came from lower middle class people. When my father had a good year, he was a small businessman. When he had a good year, we used to go to Lakewood in the wintertime, and we used to go to Monticello in the summertime. When he had a bad year, we went to Coney Island. And,
We went to Florida by driving the car to Florida.
We never went to Florida. Our rich friends went to Florida. But I have to tell you that over the course of the years, I was just lucky. I went to school in a school called Townsend Harris in Manhattan. It was an all-boys school. Before that, I was a bright little boy, and people, my elders paid attention to me and patted me on the head. What a bright kid! Then suddenly I was in an environment where everybody was bright. I never worked so hard in my life, but I used to go out after school and go to movies. I used to go to the opera. I used to walk around and go to see museums. The world opened up for me. It became now just not Brooklyn, New York. The world was something very important and very significant. And I learned a lot from that, but I had a lot of things to learn to be a part of the world. And then I was lucky. When I got out of school, I started in a firm. I had a mentor. The boss, I'll tell you a story. It was a small accounting firm, but it was a very good accounting firm, very quality. And they had two senior partners. And one was an NYU graduate, and one was a City College graduate. Well, when the NYU partner, when the partner was hiring for kids, and the interviewer was the NYU partner, he hired NYU graduates. When the City College guy was doing the interviewing, he hired City College graduates. My luck, I got out of City College and I got into this firm. I was mentored by somebody who was a good man. He knew a lot about accounting, but he was a good person. And I learned that quality helps in the quality of human relationships. And I started out, I became a titled partner in this firm after 12 years of getting out of school. That was pretty damn good. And one day, one of my clients was Saul Steinberg. He introduced me to a man who knew something about the insurance business. He taught us about the insurance business, and we went out and bought an insurance company. I became president of the company and ran the company well. I like business. I like doing business well. And when the opportunity of L'Oreal came, and interviewing now, interfacing with a great deal many other people, but getting rid of all the other businesses and sticking to our business, we grew to the second largest company in the United States in that business. Wow. But a little luck helps. Don't underestimate it. When you have it, use it.
I agree. Yeah.
This sense of positiveness that both of you feel. I was saying,
they wouldn't be here if they didn't have some reaching out. People who come to this country. You think it's easy to come to this country? It's hard, especially the way some of them did it. My mother came to this country when she was 8 years old, alone, without anything. They just put a tag on her, put her on a train that took her to a boat. She didn't speak the language. She was meeting a father who had left this country when she was born, left Russia when he was born, and couldn't afford to get her over earlier. She didn't even know. She joined a family that didn't even understand the language. People reach out. People who come to this country do it for a reason. And they have a capability, they all have an instinct. I think it's one of the reasons why we are a great, important country in the world. That the people in it have come here from either themselves or their families because they're reaching out for a better life. And they want to make a contribution to it. It works.
Thank you. I hope we all are inspired. I am. But everything they said is absolutely true. And thank you very much. I think it was fabulous.